Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kimberly and I actually have my PhD in neuroscience, even though most of this channel is about styling and fashion and that because that's just a hobby of mine. Well, let's see how quick, a little bit of yapping today to talk about 5 lessons I learned from my PhD. Lesson 1, find your community. I know that sounds kind of silly, but especially after going through undergrad, high school, where you're basically surrounded, well, more or less with the same people for most of your lives because you see each other grow up, you have childhood friends, or maybe not. Maybe you're just used to moving school districts, etc., going to a college away. I actually stayed and did college very close to home, so a lot of my friends I kept from high school, and then I also made a really good network in my undergrad. But then when grad school started, I moved away for the first time. New people, a lot of the people were a little bit older than I was. They had already done a master's or they worked out in industry for a bit. So they were a bit more mature than I was. So it was hard to relate to a lot of my colleagues in graduate school. And so I had a very difficult time identifying with people. I think, not saying that I didn't have friends, I did make friends, but not the types of friends that I had back where I grew up, that you could just call any time of day and come over. I never really established those relationships. I know I had other graduate colleagues that were able to do that much easier than I was able to. And I think in that sense, that was quite isolating for me. And graduate school is already isolating in itself in terms of doing a really challenging research project that requires a lot of intellectual time spent and time spent also doing the experiments, failing. And a lot of the times, you might be the first in your family that has ever gone and done a master's or done a PhD or anything in higher education. And it's really hard to explain to the people that are close to you what does it mean to actually go and do a PhD, right? And why are you spending so much time, I guess, really becoming that expert in that niche subject that you decided to pursue? And so finding a community of peers that understand similar struggles that you're going through, life in the lab, life outside of the lab, is incredibly important. And I was very fortunate that I met a few individuals during my time in graduate school that helped me to the finish line. I wish I had met these people sooner. I just had a very unique path in terms of, long story short, I started graduate school at one university, joined a lab that then moved to another university. And so I really did feel out of place in terms of, did I really get into, was this by merit, by chance? So I had a lot of imposter syndrome. And I'm sure if I had found my people sooner, I would felt a lot more secure in just existing in this very weird time, because graduate school has no structure like undergraduate does. With, you have the classes that you have to take, but a lot of the times now what drives your schedule is how well does an experiment go, or things like that, or if you're writing a paper or you're writing a grant. So it's a very open-ended time. And to have people that you can relate to and talk about this more openly, it just makes this really weird time easier to cope with, if that makes sense. Lesson 2 is you need to find your mentors and your sponsors. And so what I mean by that is, your mentor can not only be your supervisor for your research project, but they, or your committee members that help give you advice on your research project, but you can also seek those mentors out and not be afraid to make those connections, especially if you identify with someone or you want to get to know their story, their path. I think that's a great way to find people to support you in different aspects of not only your professional your career, but your personal life. Because when you're coming in to graduate school, you're not only trying to do this to fill this scientific curiosity or cure cancer. That's what everyone wants to try to do, something that's meaningful. But you're also building other soft skills, empathy, other communication. So it's very important to find mentors that will not only cultivate the hard skills like how to do a dissection or how to use a microscope, but the ones that will support you in times that will get rough. It's a very extended period of time. I took at least 7 years, not by chance. That's a story for another day because of extenuating circumstances that were really out of my control and in a very incredibly frustrating and toxic time of my life. But essentially, you want someone that will be there. It's a long time. You want someone that will be able to hear other sides of yourself. You are a human at the end of the day. You are not your work. Your worth does not come from what you produce in the lab. And you're already exceptional because you got into the program based on the merit and the hard work that you put forward. So you do belong in that space. That's no dispute about that. But you want someone that if you're having an off day, you can go be like, hey, I might not be in as often because I'm feeling off and I need to take the time to recover. And having a mentor that understands that you need to take care of yourself in order to put your best work forward is incredibly important. You are not just another cog in the wheel, even though I'm sure a lot of places will make you feel like that. And if they do, that's probably not a place you want to be in to begin with. And so, long story short, mentorship is so important. So, really, when you're choosing your supervisor, you want to make sure that they care about you, not only professionally, but personally. It'll make a world of a difference because a graduate degree is already challenging within itself, and you do not want to be challenged with other things outside of the science that would make you feel less than. On the other token, so I mentioned sponsors. So what is a sponsor? A sponsor, they're sort of like a mentor, but you can think of a sponsor as who's going to say your name in a room of very important people. Who are those people that will be championing you from the rooftop, singing your praises when no one else will? And having those people in your corner are so important, as well as having a good mentor. Because maybe your mentor is not as well connected as someone, let's say you want to go off to industry. What if your mentor is not so well connected with those fields? You want to seek those mentors that will introduce you to people that could open the doors in that direction. Because let's be real, not everyone's going to become a professor that go off to grad school. It's unrealistic. And unfortunately, there are such purists in academia that think that, oh, you should only go in to basically exercise a scientific curiosity and understand the fundamental science to give back to the greater good, blah. But you can also do that in industry. And you don't have to necessarily do something that's hard science. You can do something that's science adjacent. And so having those sponsors that can make those introductions or really show you what other types of careers are applicable to your degree are incredibly important. So those are the two types of people that you should be looking for as soon as possible, because these people will dictate potentially how easy the next few years will be. And that leads me into lesson 3, network as soon as possible, as often as possible. And that's something that wasn't taught to me until when I started thinking about my next steps in my career when I was getting very close to defend my thesis. And networking is so important. No one told me that until I was begging for jobs. And a great tool is you will be going to conferences, presenting your work, spend time at the booths, talk to people, learn what opportunities are out there, what companies are out there if academia isn't for you. But also, on the other hand, if you're trying to stay as an academic, which is no problem at all, conferences are also a great tool to reach your potential advisor and your potential colleagues and create that community that you're trying to grow. So that's one side of the token. The other side, especially speaking from the industrial side, LinkedIn. I have feelings about LinkedIn. Sometimes it does feel like Facebook where people overshare a bit too much. It's not, sometimes it doesn't really feel like that networking tool, but to each their own. I use it purely for networking and trying to figure out what jobs are available. Can I reach out to people, schedule informational interviews to talk about how they got into their current career paths and what steps I should take if I wanted to follow in their direction. So start doing that as soon as possible. And from there, hopefully you find those external mentors and sponsors, because you are going to be your best advocate. Hopefully your supervisor will also help you in your pursuit of your next career step. And unfortunately, not everyone is trained to do so. So if that's something that's important to you, like taking a back step to lesson 2, find a mentor and look at their track record. Where have their past alumni gone? Have they gone into industry? Are they academics? Because that will give you a good idea of what types of people they're training for what positions. And then you can rely on that network. You can go and see if your supervisor can make those introductions, and then you get those connections. So you really have to think about this. I know it's like, I'm just starting off grad school. Why do I need to think? It's important because graduate school can be a black box and you can spend decades studying a research question just because we are only, I like the diagram where he's like, there's a circle and then there's a little hump. This is what you contributed to society in terms of your research project. And maybe you'll be lucky. Maybe other people read your thesis. It's life-changing. You patent it. That's awesome. But not everyone is so fortunate to have something that's so revolutionary in a very applicable fashion. So really implore you, start building your network as soon as possible, because that will make a world of difference as you start to get close to finishing up your master's or your PhD program, and you start to think about, what do I want to do next? Then you can start to lean on your network. You're going to hear that so much as you get closer to defending your dissertation. Lean on your network. So start building your network now. As someone that is now a year outside of my PhD, I am still building my network. So it's a continuous, lifelong process of gathering information, figuring out what you want to do, and then applying yourself. Lesson 4, take your breaks. Take your vacation, take your weekends, take your evenings, unless the experiment it's absolutely necessary. You do not get paid enough to be working the insane hours that you are working. And this is your worth is not defined by the stuff you do in lab. And I can personally speak to, so a part of my PhD occurred during the pandemic. And that was such a peculiar, unusual time that I still don't believe that we experienced a pandemic just a couple of years ago. And in order to safely get work done in the lab space, we had to take precautions of how many people could be working at a time, and social distancing and masking. And I am an anxious person. I'm diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. And it came to the point where hearing people hanging out, I was just very much isolated during this time because I did not want to catch COVID. I wanted to be able to live a healthy lifestyle. I was freaked out by people being hospitalized. So to take an extra precaution, not only did I isolate, I at first worked the time shifts that were recommended based off of our lab's restrictions. But then I got to the point where I started working evenings. And that meant 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. And I did that for months. And that was horrible on my mental health. And it's because I was in a toxic situation. I was trying to avoid people that I did not want to interact with. And so I was also doing that for my mental health. But also, on the other hand, I was working at nighttime, not really seeing much of the sun. So that was also pretty bad. And while I did progress significantly in my research project, at what cost? It did redefine the trajectory of the story that I was trying to tell with what I was studying, and it really changed the direction. And I'm very proud to say it ended up being a really great story. Not to brag or anything, but any scientist would say that about their own work, am I right? But anyway, so I was so caught up in trying to develop this research project to do a good job that I forego the basic necessities I needed as a person, like eating on normal times, exercising, doing things that are important for your well being. And that really impacted me hard and did not put me in the healthiest headspace. And coupling that with not a great environment, not a supportive supervisor, I really struggled to just get done and defend. I almost point blank, almost mastered out like months before my defense. Um, it was tough because I just did not want to burden people with my problems because I had friends that were also going through challenging PhDs, and it just felt really silly to be complaining because everyone was experiencing the pandemic. Everyone was experiencing tough supervisors, but like I think there were just extenuating circumstances like implicit bias, microaggressions, other things that just made the thing more challenging. And I thought that if I kept my head down and I kept working and I kept pushing, I would have gotten out sooner. And that didn't make a difference to my supervisor. Okay, they just wanted me to work more because I kept on producing more. And that was the problem of being productive. And at a cost, I was incredibly unhappy. I was crying every day because I really hated myself and I hated my life and I hated how this whole experience really diminished me. I lost a sense of myself. I didn't feel like a person anymore. I really felt small. And it really made me question as like worth. And that's why, long story short, take the breaks, take the vacations. You're not paid enough to be overworking for nothing because a lot of the times, and not saying oh, if you have a good supervisor that values work-life balance, kudos to you if you manage to find someone like that. Sometimes they just see you as someone that's just going to push their research forward. And you don't want that. Like, you are a human first before you are a scientist or anything else. And again, as I probably have said before, you need to pour into yourself first before you pour into others, like your work and stuff, because at the end of the day, like this is only a short period of your life. And then there's so much else life to live after that. And it'll just be like a blip on your journey forward. And the nice thing about academia, there's a lot of flexibility if you're very fortunate with like how the lab works. Like you can go in, get the stuff done, and then leave. You can schedule your time however you want to, take the trips you want to. Like just one of the most flexible times in your life if you have that luxury of being able to work on your own schedule, get the stuff done needed, and have that support from lab and your supervisor. So take advantage. See the world, do the things that you love, do the hobbies that you love. Don't put those things away just because you're trying to prove your worth through your work. Because, as I said, little circle, little blip, your research project. So, in the grand scale of things, take that time off. I can't say that enough. Learn from my mistakes and pour into yourself and do the other things that you love. Lesson 5, finally. If you made it this far, thank you for staying through all the ramblings that I've talked through thus far. Lesson 5, disagreements are completely normal, especially as you level up in graduate school knowledge, your research knowledge. It's completely normal to start to disagree with some directions that your supervisor may want to pursue because it might not make sense. From personal background, I was always told by my parents to just respect authority, listen, agree. and just do it because they're older, they're wiser, they know more, etc. But in graduate school, you become that expert in your research project, much more than your supervisor, because you're reading the papers, you're doing the work, you're seeing what's actually capable and what makes the most sense for the story. Obviously, you want to be able to be challenged because good science should be challenged, and you should think about the pitfalls of your experiment or the alternative hypotheses, because you're not always going to be right. This is all about hypothesis testing and trying to figure out, does this hypothesis stand? And it's okay to be wrong. If grad school teaches you anything, it's how to fail gracefully and continuously until you start to make sense. And I always thought disagreeing meant confrontation, and I'm just such a confrontation adverse person. I don't like making people feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel uncomfortable, and so like project that I think that they're going to feel uncomfortable if I disagree. And essentially, I'm pretty sure a lot of the things that I experienced, I could have directly addressed them if I had just advocated for myself and been that villain, even though it's just being honest. And I think reframing how to address tough conversations, like disagreeing with your supervisor or trying to point out microaggression, for example, would have saved me a lot of anxiety and hurt and sadness and anger if I had just addressed it right then and there. But that wasn't in my nature back then to be assertive. I don't think that's correct, or I don't think that's necessary. I just let people talk to me, and I just had to take that in and then like myself somewhere else. Anger, that frustration. And I suffered in silence for so long until I just couldn't anymore. Like I said, I almost quit. And if it weren't for very supportive family, partner, friends that were around to help me advocate for myself, I don't think I would have finished and gotten this degree, because I was starting to realize that my well-being was suffering to the highest degree and wasn't worth a piece of paper at that point. Like I had gotten all the skills I needed to succeed in my next role, and just the whole experience really destroyed my confidence in myself as a scientist, as a person. And it really just did not sit well in terms of my ethics and my morals because of how I was treated compared to my other colleagues. And so I wish that I was more assertive, not only with my science, but also just the daily interactions that I had in the lab and how some people had spoken to me or things that had happened. I think that would have, even though that would have caused a little bit of discomfort with some people, at least I didn't hide my truth. And so I know this might be hard for some people, especially those that were taught to just be small and put their head down and keep working hard because hard work is rewarded, but you have a voice and you should use it. And there's no shame in standing up for yourself. And if you don't feel supported, again, that's not the place you should be. So again, it's okay when disagreements happen. You have a voice, use it. And if you have trouble using it, lean on your community to help you get out of those situations that might be uncomfortable, because that's what they're there for. They're there to support you. So I hope this was helpful. I'm sure there are a lot more lessons to be shared, but those were the top 5 that really resonated with me as I've had the time to reflect.